I have been spending a lot of time with dead women lately. And honestly, they have taught me more about running a business than the business type content I have consumed over the last 2 years. So buckle up because today we are talking about the most unhinged, unstoppable, and unapologetically themselves women in history and what it is they have to teach every single one of us who's trying to build something. Hello, my beautiful entrepreneurs. My name is Tabitha, and welcome to A Hot Mess Builds an Empire. I help day one entrepreneurs take that first terrifying leap into business ownership without completely losing their minds in the process. This channel is for the people who are standing on the edge of something really scary, but also equally just as marvelous, wondering if they are absolutely unhinged for even considering the jump. Before we get started in today's amazing episode that I am so excited to go over, I just want to let you know that Hot Mess Triage, my one on one business coaching service for aspiring entrepreneurs, has moved to Sundays and Tuesdays. Listen, I know what it's like to start, and there's no wrong way to start. There's no correct way to start, but there are easier ways to be an entrepreneur, and that's where I come in. So you can book me and have a one-on-one with me where we talk about your business and put together a 30 or 60-day plan, whatever it is that you need for that clarity to get a good foundation for the start of your business. You can find the link in this YouTube description that leads you to my stand store. So I'm sure a lot of you are like, excuse me, Tabitha, you said something about spending a lot of time with dead women lately. Can you elaborate on that? And well, yes, I can. So for those of you who don't know, I have a trademark brand, World Her Story. It is a podcast. It is a Substack. I'm currently in the middle of writing a women's history book, and there's a lot of research that's happening. I'm trying to write more episodes for World Her Story for a second season. I'm doing research for my book. And, I was coming across like just different stories lately that were about business women. And I was like, let's dive into this topic of business women in history because I think that would be amazingly relevant and on brand for me to talk about women in history for my entrepreneurs on here. So that's what we're diving into today. Today's going to be a very long winded episode. I'm warning you right now. I know it is because women's history is my jam. I love women's history. I have a trademark brand in women's history, for goodness sake. And, I just think there were some lessons and takeaways that I had learning about these women that I was like, I need to share these takeaways. These takeaways need to be published in some fashion. So, hello, YouTube. So, it's just that, I kept reading about these business women or creative entrepreneurs or writers or enslaved women making it work in corsets, no Wi Fi, no stand store, and a legal system that was actively working against them pretty much their whole lives. So if they can do it, Tabitha, you can do it. You can do it. If they could make it happen, we can make it happen. So let's go through some amazing stories about badass women in history who just, you know, made it work, made it happen. And I am going to be reading a lot from notes because I want to get stories right. I want to get facts correct on here. So please bear with me. I am going to be reading off my screen a bit, but I will be elaborating and talking about lessons learned and stuff like that. So just throwing it out there, reading from my notes. Thank you so much for your understanding. So I just think the thing that really started this is I was thinking about how the odds are stacked against me in a lot of ways. And I'm going to touch on my own like ultimate personal intake at the end of this episode. But I was just thinking about how the deck is stacked against me in a variety of ways, being a woman in a male dominated field at my full-time job, being a woman entrepreneur. um there are certain aspects to my life that were not set up well because I am indigenous and I come from a line of indigenous women and, I mean, indigenous family that weren't able to go to school, weren't able to get educated, weren't able to hold jobs. And so I come from a very poor family that stems from this racism, um, this, what is this like abandonment of humanity, if you will. So to be like one of the first people in my indigenous family to graduate from high school was a really big deal. And to go to college was a really big deal. To not get married and pregnant immediately at 18 was a really big deal. So, I think there are things that I have already broken through what feels like familial curses, right? Um, that, I had other family members who thought, oh, you graduated high school, that's it. Good for you. You're done. Now you can have babies and go to work. And I just didn't see it that way. I was like, no, I'm going to travel and do stuff. And, and I remember a conversation with one of my grandmothers who just didn't understand. She grew up very poor. I mean, I know that I'm white passing, but she looked very indigenous and, she, bless her, had no body hair. I had no body hair, you guys. So, oh, so jealous. So she just didn't understand why I wanted to choose to her what wasn't a correct path. And I think it stemmed from what she grew up with, what my family had grown up with. They had grown up poor. They had grown up living in secret, changing their names so that they wouldn't be found out because, in Pennsylvania, the the governor and lieutenant governor were literally looking for the heads of Native Americans. Like there are pamphlets that you can find online where it was like, if you turn in a woman, it's $5. If you turn in a man, it's this much money. If you turn into a child, it's this much money. I have a great great grandmother that went through the residential school system where they took Native children from their tribes and cut off their hair, put them in this school system, put them in like white people clothes, and she was adopted into a white person family, and there's all of these things that happened in my family's past that led to a familial cultural belief of keep your head down, don't make a fuss, just do what it is that you got to do. And a lot of them didn't graduate high school. My dad didn't graduate high school. He ended up getting his GED early because he was trying to join the Navy. And he did join the Navy, and then, there were a lot of issues there, and like he got duped basically from the recruiter, and that recruiter I think got in trouble for doing it to a lot of people. I'm just throwing that out there. But and it's just one of those things where like when I graduated high school, my grandmother told me she was so proud of me. And she never said that to me before. She told me, I'm so proud of you, and was crying. And then when I wasn't getting married, when I wasn't having babies, when I was kind of job hopping and traveling and figuring out what I wanted to do with my life, she was frustrated with me because now she couldn't figure me out. Now I was making a fuss. I was making a scene. I was making myself be seen. I started to put myself online, right, on social media. And it was like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? I would talk about being an indigenous woman. And she'd be like, ooh, no, 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 don't, don't do that. And to have that already ingrained in me as part of my familial culture, on top of the culture we grew up with you in the United States about women being in business, women having money, women owning property and all of that, right? Like these obstacles aren't new. These obstacles aren't new. And while that's weirdly comforting, it's also one of those things that, and this is very, very long-winded episode. I'm letting you know now. This is going to be one of the longest episodes I think I'm ever going to record. But, when you have familial culture on top of, like, at least for me, United States culture of how women are treated, especially in male dominated fields, there's something that needs to change. And it starts with our own mindset so that we can inspire other women to do whatever it is that they want to do whatever it is that they want to do. Right. And I think this episode is going to help you with that, especially my women followers out there. I think I have more women followers than male followers anyway, but um especially for my women followers out there who are aspiring to be business owners, who have a business and are just like, I can't do it. I can't do it. No, no, no. We're going to go through some women who had everything stacked against them in so many ways and made it happen. So I hope you take note as to the stories the true histories that I'm going to go over today, because I think it's just so important to have a reality check of like, if Madam CJ Walker could do it with everything stacked against her and become the first millionaire woman in America, the first Black woman millionaire in America, you got this. You know what I mean? So when you think the deck is stacked against you, take a step back, take a lesson from women's history, right? And realize you have way more at your fingertips than they did. And there's so much you could be doing. Don't let yourself get defeated. But we're going to go through. We're going to go through. And speaking of Madam CJ Walker, she's my first woman to talk about. So, she was born in 1867 on a Louisiana plantation. She was the first child in her family born free after emancipation. I always I always have to give myself a second when I say things like that, because what's terrifying is, like, that's not that long ago. I mean, even like segregation and shit like that in the 1900s was not that long ago here, people. So to say stuff like this, it bothers me a lot. So please bear with me, because I get very emotional about women's history. But she was orphaned by the age 7. She was married at 14 to escape an abusive situation, and widowed at 20 to raise a daughter alone. She moved to St. Louis. She worked as a washerwoman for nearly 20 years, making about $1.50 a day. In her late 30s, she began experiencing severe hair loss. And this is common among Black women at the time due to poor nutrition, stress, and lack of specialized hair care products that simply did not exist for them. She started experimenting with products and formulas, eventually developing her own line. In 1906, she married Charles Joseph Walker, took the name Madam C.J. Walker, and launched her business. Um, Now, here's what's amazing about this, right? Is like, and I think there's something brilliant about this, because at the time, you figure the early 1900s, um a Black woman trying to get a storefront for her business was probably truly, and I'm saying this realistically, not going to happen. Um so she didn't open a storefront, she didn't try to wait for customers, she traveled. And she went door to door across the South and Southeast, demonstrating her products directly to Black women. Um, and then she started to build a direct sales force of agents she called Walker Agents. She trained women in her methods and set them up to sell independently, creating income for thousands of Black women who had almost no other avenue to financial independence. I not only did she help herself with her hair loss, did she help her whole life with her business, she helped other Black women too. And there's just something so beautiful about that. And there's a lot to take from that, in the sense of, like, all the lessons that I have learned as an entrepreneur, I try to teach them to you. And I can only hope that I help other aspiring entrepreneurs to find an easier way to be successful with their businesses by starting off with a very good foundation that I was not given. I was not given that information, right? And there's just something so meaningful about sort of that parallel connection there for me. of I'm trying to help other people too. I'm trying to help other entrepreneurs too. But I love so I just love the Madam CJ Walker so much. And I know that she is, quite a popular figure as she should be. Um, but I just feel like she was so appropriate to bring up in this conversation in this episode. So eventually she built Madam CJ Walker Manufacturing Company into a national operation. She moved to Indianapolis. She built a factory. She opened a hair salon and a training school called oh shoot, what was it called? I didn't write it down. Something college, something with an L. Lilia? Lilia? Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, you guys. Uh Lilia College, I think. Anyway, by 1916, she moved to Harlem and became deeply embedded in the political and social justice movements of the era. She was not just building a business, she was building infrastructure for her community. Again, helping other Black women become financially independent. This is so huge, especially because she knew where her demographic was. She went to the South, right? She knew where the poor Black women were and was helping to give them a leg up in society and financially and get them out of certain situations. And I just love it so much. She used her wealth to fund anti lynching campaigns. She donated to the NAACP and advocated very loudly and proudly for Black Americans at a time when doing so came with real and serious personal risk. Um, and at the time of her death in 1919, she was the first self made female millionaire in American history. Love that. Love it. I love it. Um, so very importantly, I have some notes here about this. She did this as a Black woman in post Reconstruction America. Jim Crow laws, rampant racism, no access to traditional banking or business infrastructure, no safety net, no business coach, no YouTube channel telling her she could do it. She had a product she believed in, a community she was serving, and an absolute refusal to accept that the answer was no. Take some notes from Madam CJ Walker. I'll let her story sit in for a second. Yeah. I love her story. Now, this is an oversimplification, a summary, a synopsis of that woman's life. Please don't come at me that I didn't share enough about her because I'm going through a lot of women in this episode today. But I just think her uplifting her community, gorgeous, 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 gorgeous. All right, we're moving on to Lydia Pinkham. She was born in 1819 in Massachusetts. She was raised as a Quaker. And for those of you who are not familiar with Quakers, they have more progressive views, especially at the time, about women's roles. And so her idea about a woman in society was way more progressive than the people around her. So for years, she made herbal remedies at home for friends and neighbors. And she essentially had a side hustle before side hustle had a name. In 1873, her family hit severe financial hardship after a series of bad investments. She was in her 50s. She commercialized her home remedies. She had a botanical compound marketed specifically to women for menstrual and menopausal symptoms. At a time when women's health was barely discussed in polite society, Lydia Pinkham put her own face on her product packaging and spoke directly to women about their bodies. Late 1800s, this was so radical. This was so radical. You know what's crazy too is I think we still have like this weird taboo about women's periods, menstrual cycles, perimenopause, menopause, all of that stuff, right? Like there's still a taboo about that shit. I'm still paying taxes on feminine hygiene products as if like I chose to be a woman and I have all these things that happen, right? But like men can get Viagra for free and condoms. I'm gonna go down a rabbit hole. But anyway, there's just something so fantastical about this woman putting her own face on her product packaging and reaching out to women about their menstrual cycles and menopause. Like, wow. Like, I'm sure there was shock and awe across the board. And I'm sure there were whispers in households like, did you see this new product? And she has her face on it. You know what I mean? Like, there's something so bodacious about that. Like, Lydia Pinkham, go get him. So, women's health was considered unseemly as a marketing topic. She did it anyway. She built a direct mail operation. She wrote pamphlets. She answered letters personally from women seeking health advice. She became one of the most recognized faces in American advertising. Her face was on the bottle, on the ads, and in the newspapers. She essentially pioneered direct to consumer marketing and personal branding at the same time. In the 1870s, as a middle aged woman who started because her family needed money. Her company survived her death in 1883 and continued operating well into the 20th century. This is really important to note that not only did she create a company that did well while she was alive, it went into the 1900s as well. Um, look her up if you are intrigued, but there's so many parallels about her and what it is to be a woman now. Like there are so many taboo topics about our bodies and like being pregnant and postpartum and perimenopause and body hair and all kinds of stuff. You guys, like all kinds of stuff. And this woman was facing very similar issues that we're still facing today and put her face on the damn packaging to sell it. Like how brave and how amazing. And I got to commend her for it, right? Like it's just brilliant. What to take away from these two ladies? When you are sitting there feeling like the deck is stacked, the doors are closed, and you are too late or too broke or too unqualified, I need you to understand these women didn't have the internet, they didn't have a stand store, they didn't have a YouTube channel, they didn't have a podcast, they didn't have lead magnet free downloadables, from other business people. Um what they had was a very long and heavy list of hell no, racism, sexism, closed doors, legal systems designed to keep them out, and societies that actively mocked them for trying. So we've come a bit of a way from that time, not in all areas as well as I would hope, but they figured out how to run an empire anyway, right? With all of that stacked against them. And is it hard to do your business? Yes. I think it's hard to do my business on some days. Some days it's so much easier. Um, and then there's some days where I'm like, I don't know if I can do this anymore because XYZ thing, right? But this is not new territory. You come from a long line of women who looked at the impossible and said, not today. Not today. So, my next section of women I want to talk about are women who built sideways instead of building straight because they couldn't. So, women historically couldn't walk through front doors, so they built side doors, back doors, whole new buildings. True story. Let's talk about Victoria Woodhull. Now, I go back and forth about if I like her or not, because there are some things I've read about her, like some essays I've read about her that she was like a huge racist. Um, so I go back and forth about her, but she was the first woman to run for president, and she tried to drag Frederick Douglass in as her VP. But before that happened, men wouldn't take her seriously about her financial literacy and investment insights. So she and her sister Tennessee Claflin became the brokers, opening their first woman owned brokerage firm on Wall Street in 1870. And they were mocked, they were scandalized, they were written off by the press and the public. I mean, there were like some scandalous things written about them, but their firm was super successful. And listen, I, the big takeaway from this is if they won't let you in the room, build your own fucking room, right? Build your own room to sit in, build your own building to run your business in. Like, don't let anybody get you down with a closed door in your face. If they close the door, go find another door, go find another room, go find another building, and you be the one who builds it, right? They have a door, you have a building. Ta da! Ta-da. Okay, the next one. Oh my God, I love this woman so much. I have a podcast episode about her. So for those of you who have listened to World Her Story podcast, you will know that I have a deep infatuation with Madame Lou Graham. For those of you who have listened to my podcast. Oh my God, I love this woman so much. So listen, she was an immigrant, I think from Germany, if I'm not mistaken. Her past is a little hairy, right? She came over from Germany and she landed in I think I want to say Minneapolis because you started in Minneapolis for the Oregon Trail, but the Oregon Trail started to die off because they started to build railroads and they would go up to like San Francisco, Seattle, that kind of thing, right? So she ends up in Seattle. Now, her career was that of a woman in a brothel. That was her career. Um, and she took that career and she made herself a madam of a brothel in Seattle. Now she got arrested a bunch of times. Her girls would get arrested a bunch of times. So she went directly to the Seattle city leaders and businessmen and pitched her brothel like a legitimate business proposal because it was one. So here's what she proposed, that it would be a fine, excuse me, it would be one of the finest establishments ever. She provided a customer guarantee to her clients that if for whatever reason they had to visit the physician because of a visit with one of her girls, she would pay for the fee. Um and she also like educated her girls. They knew about politics, economics, opera. They were incredibly cultured. And, some of the things that I have read about her, which it's really the information about Madame Lou Graham kind of gets a little minimal in certain areas because we're talking about, the late 1800s here. And it's really difficult to ascertain her LGBTQ status of girls. But there are some people who have written that she did have transgender girls, that she was in a relationship with a woman that she lived with and took care of her daughter. So, like, there are also some like really amazing personal life things about Madame Lou Graham. Um, but anyway, it just goes to show that she was very progressive. Um, cared about the health and well-being and intelligence of the women that it was that she was housing and hiring. Um, but traveling businessmen made more. There's a quote from one of the historians who wrote about her that said something along the lines of there were more business deals done in the parlor of Madame Lou Graham's brothel than anywhere else in Seattle, because that is where you took businessmen who came to travel and do business with you. You took them to Lou Graham's. Um, so what is so amazing about her? She was rich. She was so rich. Um, she saved Jacob Firth's bank during the Panic of 1893 with a single large deposit. Now, the Panic of 1893 was like an economic recession, especially hitting Seattle. She bailed out Seattle's most prominent families with personal loans. So not only did she give them personal loans because she had so much money to give out, she made money back on the interest from the loans that they were paying back to her. And she helped rebuild this city after the Great Fire of 1889. Um, just a quick side note here for those of you who don't know, Seattle lumber town, built entirely out of wood, caught fire, and all of Seattle burnt down. This is the truth. All of Seattle burnt down. So then they rebuilt it out of all stone and brick and stuff like that. But the entire city burned down. People lost their jobs, their homes, everything. And she helped bail the city out. Um, she was so integral to Seattle's infrastructure that when a police officer accidentally arrested her, she was found not guilty, and the mayor was forced to resign for allowing it to happen. LOL. LOL. Yes, she employed people of all races, including indigenous women, which was illegal at the time. You were not allowed to employ indigenous women, and she did anyway. Her accountant was also, I believe, a Chinese immigrant, which I think was illegal for him to be employed as well. But she employed him and she kept him for like decades as her accountant. Um, so the lesson here is that she didn't sneak in the back. She walked up to the city's most powerful man, presented a business plan, and made herself indispensable. This woman made herself so invaluable to the city that when the city literally burned to the ground, she was saving it with all of her money from all of her business. And I just think that's so badass. Like, how could you not be in awe of this woman? Um, so, what to take away from Victoria and Madame Lou Graham here is that um, they identified the gatekeeping, right? They identified the male domination and they made themselves the solution and built something so valuable it couldn't be ignored, especially Madame Lou Graham. It turns into like a weird survival strategy for them, but they were just like so ballsy. So ballsy. And I love that so much. So please take some lessons away from them. Like when the male domination is putting you down, when you feel like there are things that just don't seem to be working out for you, whether it's like literally the city. Because I know I have read from different entrepreneurs that like there are city laws that they can't open something within certain miles of this or whatever. If when it's literally like the city and laws and people mocking you or people thinking what you're doing isn't a legitimate business, prove them wrong. Show them your business plan. Make things happen. Um, Victoria Woodhull was very successful with her sister with their stock brokerage firm. And Madame Lou Graham, very successful during her life. Um, Now she did have like a kind of a sad ending, which I'm not going to go through. Like you can listen to my World Her Story podcast episode about her. Um, but yeah, she was just so cool, and I learned about her on an underground tour in Seattle, and I was hooked. She was one of the few women that inspired me to start the podcast. Her and Margaret Cochran Corbin, who was the first woman to receive a military pension in the United States from the Revolutionary War. Um, it's just they didn't let it stop them. Anything. They just kept going. Right? And you're going to see that theme playing throughout here, but I want to keep talking about these women because it's so important to note that it wasn't just one exception to the rule. It was all women who wanted to be their own boss, to be entrepreneurs, to be more than what society said that they could be legally, right? So next stop, we're talking about women who didn't wait for permission. So I don't, you know, this is something that really hits close to home because I felt like when I first started my business, I had to wait for permission for a lot of things. Um, Somebody's here. My doorbell just rang and my dogs are going to go crazy. So somebody just rang the doorbell and I just had to wait. So because my dogs hate the doorbell, will forever hate the doorbell. I could ring the doorbell and they go berserk. Like they hate the doorbell. And I don't know who that was. Solicitor probably. But anyway, as I was saying, we're going to go over 4 women who did not ask for permission. And I feel like this is really important because I have waited for permission for things, not realizing it, that I was waiting for somebody to be like, no, it's okay. Go ahead. You can do it. And one day I realized, like, why am I waiting for somebody to tell me it's okay to do what it is that I want to do? It's my life. It's my business. I was letting people dictate what it was that I was doing because I was waiting for permission. And then someone would be like, oh, no, you can go ahead and do that. And I'd be like, oh, okay. Thank you so much. And I'm like, what? One day I just woke up and was like, what am I doing? Why am I just like letting people give me permission? Like, And that's a hard mindset thing to get over. But I hope these next few women that we talk about will help you with that permission business, right? So the first one I want to talk about is Ida B. Wells. I don't know if you can see it. Oh, my ring light's in the way. I have like 4 books of Ida B. Wells biography. They're the same. Like people kept gifting them to me. People gift me like women's history books all the time, which I love so much. But then you end up getting repeats. Um, I should really start like an online list for people so they can see what it is that I have and don't have, because they're trying to be very thoughtful, but then I wind up with like the same book. So anyway, Ida B. Wells. She was born into slavery in 1862 in Mississippi, but she was emancipated as an infant when the Civil War ended. She became a journalist and civil rights activist at a time when neither of those paths was remotely available to a Black woman. When mainstream newspapers would not publish her investigations into the lynching of Black Americans, she self-published. She wrote, funded, and distributed her own pamphlets and reports, including Southern Horrors and The Red Record, documenting racial violence with receipts when no institution would touch it. Had her newspaper office burned to the ground in Memphis as retaliation, she received death threats and was run out of the South. She kept going anyway. So, when the platform does not exist for what it is that you are doing, build the platform. I think this is really important for authors who, try to go the traditional publishing route. Self-publish. There are so many people out there who help with editing and who help with book design and all of that stuff, that you could literally have your own little army with you to publish your book by yourself. So, but I think, this is also for like um software as a service, SaaS, right? Like if there is a platform that doesn't exist, create it, right? Like don't sit back and be like, I don't have this tool. Create the tool. Create the tool. Create the platform. And that's something that you can take from Ida B. Wells, is like, if it doesn't exist, create it. I love that lesson from her. Mary Seacole. I hope I'm saying her last name right. She was born in 1805 in Jamaica to a Scottish soldier who was her father and a Jamaican mother who ran a boarding house and practiced traditional medicine. She grew up learning herbal and traditional healing methods alongside her mother, and when the Crimean War broke out, she applied to the British War Office to serve as a nurse alongside Florence Nightingale. She was rejected consistently. She applied multiple times and was rejected every time. The reasons were never officially stated, but let's be honest here, it was racial bias. So she self-funded her own passage to the front lines, built a hotel and medical facility that she called the British Hotel near the battlefield, and treated wounded soldiers herself anyway. She was not given access, so she bought her own ticket and showed up. So when they say no, fund it yourself and go anyway. I mean, how amazing is Mary's story here? Like, just, first of all, the bravery to do it, the bravery to go to the front lines. I, you know, Amazing. Like Margaret Cochran Corbin has a very similar going to the front line story in that aspect. And I couldn't do it. Right. Like there were times where, I majored in journalism for a hot minute, and I really thought about being a military journalist, like a war journalist, because I just thought it would be so fascinating. But I couldn't put myself on the front lines. Like I just didn't, I don't have the bravery in me for that. So for this woman to put her life on the line to help the lives of others, and made her own hotel and medical facility and everything like that, like uh, amazing. Amazing. Gorgeous. Bodacious. Like I say about everybody else in this list. Okay, here is a personal favorite of mine. Um, I am doing a podcast episode on her. Um, and I want to do her justice, but her information's kind of all over the place because she is half Indigenous, half Black. She was born around 1844, give or take. She was of Chippewa and African American heritage. She was orphaned young and raised by her mother's Chippewa community. Now, she faced racism and sexism, like everybody, to establish herself as an artist in America. And she was at one point, this is so crazy, she was at school and she was accused of poisoning two classmates and attacked by a mob, neither of which resulted in any legal justice for her. So rather than continue fighting a system that was clearly not going to fight for her, she relocated to Rome in 1866 all by herself. She built her entire sculptor career in Italy because the first profession and became the first professionally recognized Black and Native American sculptor, and shipped her work back to America from abroad. Um, this is a big deal here. Uh, if this country ain't doing it for you, um, find the room that will and build your name there. I often think about not living in America like all the time, mostly because of the political infrastructure being a shit show and, women's rights and women's health care and just like what it is that is available to me as a woman in a modern world. There's more available somewhere else that would help take care of me and be understanding of what it is that my needs are from a social aspect and from a political aspect and from a health aspect. So it is okay to sit there and question if this country is correct for you, because the answer is whatever it is that you feel, right? I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, well, that it's correct. If you feel this country is not treating you with the respect that it is that you need and deserve, I know plenty of people who have moved abroad to see that their life turns out better for them and their families and their careers. So do it, move. You know what I mean? Like, make it happen. I have to worry about traveling with pets at this point in time. Um, so that's what kind of holds me back. And, finding a job and making sure that this makes money that I could move. um, but it's just one of those things, man, where like if the environment isn't working, change the environment. Leave the environment, right? And that's what Edmonia Lewis did for herself. So next up, I love Phyllis Sweetley. Her story is just so empowering. So she was born in 1753 in West Africa. She was kidnapped and enslaved as a child. She was brought to Boston. She taught herself how to read and write, and then she began writing poetry as a teenager. And when she sought publication, she was required to appear before a panel of 18 prominent Boston men to prove she had actually written her own work um, before she could even be considered for publishing. And when she sat in front of the panel, she proved it, of course. She became the first African American and first enslaved person to publish a book of poetry in 1773. She negotiated her own publication deal while she was still enslaved. Are you freaking kidding me here? So they made her prove herself in a room, and she did it. She proved herself. I I am speechless when it comes to this story because it just, she did it while she was enslaved. Like, how flippin' phenomenal is that to get this achievement? Like, publishing is a great feat. And, even modern day, I'm very, very happy for people who publish, whether you self publish or traditional publish. I'm very happy for you. But just everything against her being so young, right? She was 20ish and still being enslaved. Like, amazing, amazing story. Um, so, I think it's important to note that none of these women had a clear path. None of them had institutional support. None of them had anyone handing them a roadmap. And they identified what they needed to do, found whatever door or window or opening or crack in the floor or whatever it is that they needed to be able to get out. And they went, right? They went for it. They left, whatever it is. So they didn't wait for permission. That is not a strategy, and it has never been. So stop waiting for permission. I want you to take lessons from these women and stop waiting for permission. You don't need permission to be the amazing you entrepreneur that you are, right? Go out and do it. Do not wait for anybody to give you permission for what it is that you want or need to do for your business. It's your business. Do whatever you want. Hard pivot into a different topic or a different genre or a different niche or whatever. I've done it. And honestly, there's been so much good that has come out of my hard pivot that I'm so glad that I'm owning being my authentic self. So I just think that, um, you know, waiting for permission is something that we don't realize that we do. And one day you just wake up and you're like, why am I asking people if this is okay? Like it just dawns on you one day. So if you're one of those people who's like, why am I waiting for this guru to say it's okay to do this? Why am I waiting for this person to say it's okay to switch your niche? Why am I waiting for this person to say this? If you feel like you're doing that right now, that means you're waiting for permission and you need to stop immediately. Easier said than done, I know, but your mental health will be so much better when you stop waiting for permission from other people to do whatever it is that you want to do to be your authentic self and for your business to thrive. Okay, so I'm done talking about the women in history specifically, but I want to talk about what this changed for me as a business owner. So, first and foremost, it made imposter syndrome seem really silly. Um, Man, imposter syndrome. When you sit there and you're like, who am I to do this? I'm not qualified for this. Um, I'm part of a very long line of women who had absolutely no idea what they were doing, but did it anyway. Um, None of them had blueprints. None of them had mentors. None of them had Wi-Fi. None of them had stand stores. None of them had social media. None of them had other entrepreneurs before them giving them roadmaps to figure stuff out, right? Like they were part of impossible circumstances. They were literally part of systems that were purposefully built against them. Purposefully built against them. So, like, the fact that these women were still successful and they are legends because of what it is that they did, and they went against the grain and they went against what I feel is wrong that society did, and politics and all of that jazz and the laws and everything. They went against everything and they made it happen. Whatever their dream was, whatever their business was, they made it happen. And, I just think that when you sit there and you do the imposter syndrome of I'm not qualified to do this, that imposter syndrome has gotten a lot quieter for me lately. It really has, because I am in a privileged position of being a white passing woman. I have a decent job with health benefits. I'm married to someone who has a decent job with good health benefits. Like, we are in a privileged situation. And I think it's just one of those, like, imposter syndrome is not something that I should be worried about. It's just not. So, just kind of diving into the unqualified area, I mean, women were legally listed as unqualified for thousands of years. They were not allowed to own property or sign contracts or access education or hold patents or open bank accounts, right? That was not an accident. The system was working exactly as designed to keep women out and then to also keep marginalized communities out. This system was designed for white men, and this system is still catering to white men. So if you're not a white man and you have all these barriers in front of you, it's because the system was designed for not you for thousands of years. There is something that I think about when I travel. When I go to places that were like, legendary in Pompeii, or places that were built part of ancient Rome, right? Let's use ancient Rome as an example. Those places were designed for the white men who were in charge. They were not designed for me to be there. They were not designed for me to look at them in awe. They were not designed for me to visit in any capacity. They were not designed for me to have an opinion about. They were not designed for me to write about them. And I am there. I am present and I am there. And I want you to think about that space that you take up when you travel. Like, there are so many places that were not designed with women in mind that for you to stand there is an extraordinary feat. And I know women travel all the time, and women are moving about all the time with their daily lives in these places, but I'm talking about actively standing there and thinking about it and taking in the air and just exhaling that you are a powerful person for being in a place that was not designed for you to be in. It was not designed for you to be in. A lot of places, pretty much all places, have been designed for white men to thrive. And the more you show up, the less of the I'm unqualified narrative you think, the more you're beating the system. Down with the patriarchy, right? This is like one of the most feministy things I'm going to be talking about today, along with this whole episode just being a feminist act. But these women built empires, and all of this stuff was written against them in law, right? So now that a lot of those laws are taken away, and we can open our own bank accounts, and we can have our own businesses, and we can own property, and we can invest and have contracts and access education and all of this stuff, you are qualified to do what it is that you want to do. I have said this in multiple videos before. It is okay to be new to social media, new to running a business, but it doesn't mean that you are new at the skill that you are offering with your business, right? It doesn't mean that, like, and here I go with knitting again. It doesn't mean that just because you just started an Instagram account today about your knitting, but you've been knitting for 25 years, that you're new to knitting, right? You can be new to Instagram and still be an expert in your field. So don't sit there and do the I'm unqualified narrative. Stop that. That kind of goes hand in hand with waiting for permission. No, 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 no. So here's probably one of my biggest takeaways from reading about all these women in business and all these creative entrepreneurs, and um is that it makes my mission seem and feel bigger than the money. Now, we live in a capitalistic society, so obviously money is a factor. Revenue for my business is a factor. It's important for me to make money so I can live, right? It's important for me to make money so my business can thrive and pay for itself and whatever. Um, but the mission is so much more now. It means so much more. Before, my mission was like just, help people meet one story at a time. And the mission has evolved over time to helping day one entrepreneurs and helping get women's histories out there, and, retelling feminist mythologies, because women got a bad rap in feminist mythology, let me tell you. And feminist mythology isn't even a thing, it's just mythology, but I'm just creating feminist mythology, right? If it's not there, create it, right? Feminist mythology is going to become a huge thing, right? And I'm starting to see these retellings happen, such as, like, I think there's a book that I just bought it just came out, called I, Medusa, right? Like, there's these feminist retellings of these mythological things where women got a super bad rap, and it's just so important to look at your mission and know that it's more important than the money. And when you realize your mission is way more important than the money starts showing up, just because you're so focused on the mission. And it's just so interesting how it works that way. It's so interesting how it works that way. Yeah, so I have a few remaining notes here. Like I said, this is going to be the longest episode, I think, of A Hot Mess Builds an Empire in a while. My problems are still there, but they feel more manageable. I'm not going to pretend that any barriers that I have from, in my life don't exist anymore because I read some women's history books. Listen, I work in a warehouse full time. It is a complete male dominated field. I have men scream in my face that I was undermining their authority because I was doing my job. I've had men scream in my face that they didn't like that I was good at my job. I've had men literally holler, scream in my face, made my ear ring because of how loud they were screaming at me. And they were celebrated for their toughness. I've brought concerns to managers in a professional and rational capacity. I have sat down and talked to my peers, my superiors, in a way that I'm talking to you right now. And I have been told that I was irrational and emotional, and I'm just being a little too sensitive about it. there are still so many barriers that I face um, that it makes it easier to go like, this is why I'm going to be my own boss and this is why I'm going to have my own business because I'm tired of men talking to me this way. But some of it doesn't seem as bad and is manageable, right? Than systemic racism. Um, than laws literally written that I can't hold property, or own property, I mean, or write contracts or have my own bank account or anything like that. Like I can sit there and I can go, okay, I can manage this situation. As shitty as it is, I can manage this situation and work on that and go through the channels and make it better for myself. Or I could leave the environment, right? Change the environment, leave the environment. Learn from Edmonia Lewis. Change the environment, leave the environment. Um, but the battles are still real. They're still there. There's still so much work to be done in this world for women. Um, but when I put my obstacles next to Madam C.J. Walker or Ida B. Wells or Phyllis Wheatley, women who had everything running against them on purpose, truly because they were, you know, of a marginalized community. My barriers feel more manageable. And I will be damned if I fail because they did not. If they went up against all of that stuff, and they made it out in like the coolest way possible. Creative entrepreneurs putting their faces on their own labels, publishing their own stuff, self-publishing, getting a publishing deal while being enslaved. Like, I'll be damned if I fail. I'll be damned if I fail because it's just not an option anymore. And to empower myself with this information, to empower myself with this mindset is a really big game changer for me in my business. And I hope that this information is very helpful to you and your business as well. And I think women's history has made me a more confident business owner. Like there's just something so fantastical about these women, so phantasmagorical about these women, that it has taught me to own my creativity. It has taught me to own my perspective and my approach. And there's nothing wrong with going into something with zero permission, right? Like I am my own permission. So there's nothing wrong with building sideways and building my own building, right? If doors are going to keep shutting in my face, okay, then I'll build over here and I'll make it thrive and it's going to be amazing and you're going to be super jelly, right? Like history is full of women who did exactly that and left legacies and outlasted every single person who told them not to or told them no. And they are not one-offs, right? Like Madam C.J. Walker is just like not like this anomaly. I just gave you a list of women from a very long list of women who made it happen, who made it work, who were very successful. So the reminder we all need, especially aspiring women entrepreneurs, show up. Show up when it's hard. Show up when you don't feel ready. Show up when nobody's watching you yet. Show up because that is what they did. And that is what we do, right? We show up. If this episode hit you somewhere in the feels, right? Hit you somewhere hard, made you reflect. I hope so. That was the whole point, was to look at women's history and compare it to the entrepreneurial journey that we're facing today. But these are the types of deep diving conversations that I have in Hot Mess Triage, which is my one-on-one business coaching service for day one entrepreneurs who are looking to set themselves up for success, right? So if you are interested in working with me one-on-one, you can find the link in the description of this video that leads to my Stan Store where you can book me. I also have the Mess Hall, which is a monthly community for entrepreneurs to just connect. I am running a workshop next month on building rate sheets and package sheets and pricing yourself accordingly, because that's something that nobody ever went over with me. And I just know that that's something that I would have loved if somebody held a workshop on. Here is what I price myself at. Here are the packages. here's a template for you to be able to go through and utilize this template yourself. So that is also in the description. I believe it's May 23rd. It's a Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The mess hall will be convening for this particular workshop. But you have some homework to do. I want you to go through and I want you to find one woman from history who built something. You can use one of the women that I talked about in this episode. That's okay. Just one. And then I want you to come back and tell me that you don't have what it takes to build your own business. And I expect to have 0 comments on this video. Unless they're like, how much you love me. That's okay. But you have what it takes. And like I said before, if they managed to do it in the past with laws literally written against them, I'll be damned if I fail with my business, because that's just not an option. If they succeeded, I can definitely succeed. And these are the things that I have been thinking about from women's history and putting that up next to my business and just going, I can do this. I can totally do this. And you can do this too. I know you can do this. So, thank you so much for watching. This video was a long one. So thank you so much for watching if you got this far. Bless you. Godspeed. And please like this video. Please subscribe if you are not a subscriber. And I will see you next time.